limited commercial breaks.
2 months after the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, the city of Charlottesville is teaming up with business owners and neighborhood associations, hoping to prevent what they call private militias from coming to future rallies. They are now suing self-described militia groups and white nationalist organizations, including several leaders of the Unite the Right rally. They were involved in those fights back in August in Charlottesville. Authorities say these groups came disguised as law enforcement and they were just looking for a fight. One attorney leading the lawsuit says it's not aimed at trying to infringe on free speech rights. The goal is simply to keep people safe. An African-American man who was beaten at that infamous white supremacist rally in Charlottesville is now facing the same charges as the men who attacked him. You might remember seeing this video, this disturbing video. Watch. Here's what happened as it plays out for you. This happened after the rally. Several white men attacked DeAndre Harris in a parking garage. They kicked him to the ground and then they kept punching him. His lawyer says the beating was so bad he got a concussion and he had to have staples put in his head. DeAndre Harris is now facing a felony charge after one of those men, Harold Cruz, who describes himself as a Southern nationalist, accused Harris of injuring him during the fight. So an arrest warrant was issued for Harris earlier this week. That's the African-American man. He turned himself into police this morning, and he's since been released. Harris's lawyer is S. Lee Merritt. He joins me live now. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So police are saying that your client initiated the fight with these white supremacists. What do you say happened?
Well, what it appears that's happened is that the Charlottesville Police Department, or the city of Charlottesville, is allowing these white supremacists to re-victimize DeAndre Harris. He reacted to one of his friends being speared with the sharp end of a Confederate pole by sort of loosely swinging a flashlight in a man's direction before being pummeled by six white supremacists, hospitalized and suffering some very, very severe injuries. For the white supremacists to be allowed now to come back and say that he caused them injury during his beating is really absurd.
Well, why would police say such a thing if it was absolutely untrue?
Well, the ironic thing is that the law enforcement is not saying such a thing. In fact, law enforcement was not involved in this process whatsoever. The man, who happens to be a North Carolina attorney, filed a complaint with law enforcement and then walked over to a magistrate's office. After speaking with the magistrate, a warrant was issued only offering his side, only offering medical evidence that he was injured. And we do have evidence that he was injured in a completely separate encounter involving what appeared to be an attack by another white male.
So I'm not completely understanding what you're saying. So someone from out of town, on behalf of the white supremacists, came into town and charged that your client started this fight, and that's why these charges were leveled?
Yes, someone from out of town went directly to a magistrate judge, a lawyer who happens to be a white supremacist and leader of the League of the South of North Carolina, came back to Charlottesville and filed a complaint directly with the magistrate judge, who on his word alone issued a warrant for DeAndre's arrest.
So why would the judge agree to that, just on the basis of this lawyer's claim? Why not go back to the police department and say, or go back to the prosecutor's office, right, and say, what's up with that?
That's exactly both what the law requires them to do, is to get authorization either from law enforcement or from the district attorney's office. That's exactly the question that law enforcement asked. They said that they were expecting, when this complaint was filed, to be allowed to complete a thorough investigation. If they had completed a thorough investigation, they would have discovered that this man, who I believe to be Harold Cruz, or who the warrant shows to be Harold Cruz, was actually injured after DeAndre was already in the hospital.
So I'm trying to read between the lines here. So what do you think is going on here?
I'm not going to speculate about a relationship between Harold Cruz, the white supremacist, and this magistrate judge. I know that an exception was made. While citizens can go directly to magistrates and get permission to issue a warrant, there is a normal process that should take place, except for in the most egregious cases where the evidence is clear. Here, there's so much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious. Like, are you insinuating it's because your client is African American, or because this judge has sympathies with white supremacists?
Well, you know what? I think there's a national narrative going forward, promulgated by the president, who says there was blame on both sides. And so you took a clear victim like DeAndre Harris, who doesn't have a criminal record whatsoever, who was clearly a victim and who was beaten severely, and say, well, maybe some of the blame can be shared by him and it's worth looking into. It's not worth looking into. In an attempt to appear impartial, this system is being used by white supremacists.
So you believe ultimately it's President Trump's fault that your client was charged with a crime?
I wouldn't say it's President Trump's fault. I think it's a national narrative that he supports, that it wasn't just the white supremacists and the hate groups who were at fault, but the citizens of Charlottesville who came out to tell them that they were not welcome were at fault as well. That's something that the president has said, and it's something that others have echoed, but it's not his fault. It's the fault of the actors in this case. And in this case, I believe that a magistrate judge was taken advantage of, and that this was an intentional plot by the white supremacist group League of the South.
All right. Esley Merritt, please keep us posted. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Will do. Thank you.